help a brother out here. Okay, cool. So as you can see here, our mind map is divided into, we had two kind of communities of thought, but not opposing communities of thought. They kind of complement one another. We started off by saying that policy is often developed at a national or an international level, but it's implemented at a local level. And there's often a disconnect between the two, where local land users or custodians of the land aren't given the chance to give recommendations to the develop or during the policy development stage. And we said that, you can see as this little diagram here, the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry speaks to the provincial governance level, which speaks down to the governance at a land user level, but there's often not a place or something in place for the land user to speak up into the higher level provincial decision makers. And this process, we need to co-create policy. We need a space where everyone has an input into the creation of policy. But on the other side of the wall, we said that it's not an issue of policy. It's an issue of our policy is great. We got good policy in place in our country, but it's about implementing that policy. We have the issue of implementing policy. The key policies have been developed, but are not being implemented properly. And one of the issues that we have there is that we don't have the correct institutional structures in place to implement that policy. We don't have the proper institutional structures on the ground within communities, even at a municipal level, to kind of govern and regulate and give or issue penalties or anything like that.
Can I just say something about CARA? So one of the things that did pop up is this, I don't know whether you're aware of this acronym. Somebody else might need to define the acronym for me. It's this Conservation of, what is it?
Agricultural Resources
Act. But it's in the process of being rethought, and a new act is going to come in. So one of the things, and a useful point that was made, was that even though the legislation might be slightly old and cover both communal and commercial farmers, it's the way it's implemented in a kind of bespoke way which is important. So it's adapted to the local situation. So I think that's a useful point.
Definitely. Yeah, and just going on from that, we had a point here. It's an ideal vision. Policy is an ideal vision, but it's not a blueprint, or it's not something rigid. It needs context. It can be implemented in many different ways, and what's essential to implementing policy is the context. As we had our CARA example, it needs to be adapted and molded for different situations. And we said that sometimes this can be done through technical briefs. Technical briefs, maybe someone can help me out here.
So that's a way for people at, say, civil society level to feed into policy consultation. But that's the current mechanism that people want for this to happen.
Definitely. Just going back to policy developments at a local level. Let me just move around this side, sorry guys. We talked about how we can make the system more inclusive of local communities into the development of policy. Is there something that civil society can do? How can we as implementers on the ground help push local voices into that policy development realm? What mechanisms do we need to be able to feed into policy? And what will be well received at a policy development level? Do we need to have knowledge sharing workshops like this? Do we need to bring policy policy influences into the field on the ground, where they can actually see how policy is being implemented. And often the policy development is so rigid and rigorous that it's hard for local land users to enter into that process. Like, it's, of course, like there's so many different steps and different processes that are going on during the policy development process, that where can a local user enter that, and how do they know how to enter that development space? Yeah, we had a carrot and a stick here as well for implementing policy. I think I've just about covered everything.
I just might chip in.
Policy?
I mean, that model at the bottom is quite an interesting one, because even though maybe policy is becoming more, I think it was argued that policy is becoming more inclusive and consultation based, that the actual way that delivery is at the moment is that, you know, different government departments are mandated with delivery to certain targets. So where is the disconnect potentially between that and what the community actually wants? So you are given a set of things that this is what you're working towards, but you know, how much is that set by the government versus how much of what the community wants?
Definitely. And just on that point, yeah, I think policy is often imposed on communities rather than, there's this big word here, co-create. It's imposed rather than co-created. And that's why often it falls flat on its face, because there's no local buy-in, and there's no kind of no local endorsement of policies. Yeah. Cool, thanks.
A big influence on what the priorities are going to be. And so in thinking about that, we have these two land tenure regimes, private and communal areas. And we didn't necessarily set priorities for each of those, but we thought, okay, our general priority is mainly, number one, wattle management, and number two, this idea of land sparing. Heidi, fill in if I explain this badly, but if you see this small picture here, you have land sharing, which is the current way that things are done, right? And so within that land sharing regime, you have some cropland, some livestock that is roaming freely, and then some natural land where there's also wattle removal happening. And what the priority or the suggestion is to move towards a land sparing regime where you would have a greater amount of natural land and then more intensified kind of fodder crop development, and then also cropping and also animal production going on in a more intensified manner. And so that this natural land where you would be removing wattle would also be, you know, supplying more water to the system, etc. So water gains and carbon losses through that process. So these are our priorities. The context that that's based off of is down here. So these social ecological dynamics. So in thinking about those different dynamics, some of the dynamics that we've observed over time is that there's less rangeland now, and there's a higher number of animals that are using that same space. There's a social dynamic going on of young people not being interested in livestock, and so there's a rural to urban migration, and related to that kind of a land abandonment or abandonment of old lands due to this disinterest in investing in the rural sphere. And then also another dynamic ecologically is that there's increases in woody biomass and also increases of bare ground across the landscape. And the way that livestock are being managed currently is that they're primarily free-ranging, they're free-roaming. And that these are based on a certain set of preferences that livestock owners have currently. So with this as our general priorities, these wattle management, and then related to that, this idea of land sparing, we had a couple questions for other groups. Did I miss anything about those explanations that you guys want to know?
One thing maybe is that if you did have some land intensification where you grow some fodder crops, and then you would expect to have increased or improved animal management, improved animal condition, that you would have to prevent the case where now okay, we've got more fodder, let's just have more animals, to prevent that, where then you would lose your natural land and increased biodiversity in water. To prevent that, you would have to link that intensification to an agreement where those animals would continually come off and be sold at a younger age when they are high value, and so that could be part of existing conservation agreements and incentives that are provided, like auctions and the other incentives in the meat naturally, existing meat naturally initiative.
Right, so we spoke about several frameworks that support maybe these priorities, which include, this idea that we have the Meat Naturally program that would support enhancing market access and more frequent animal sales, and also selling animals maybe at 18 months or at younger age, as Heidi was saying. And then also this land sparing can be set up within the conservation agreements that are another framework that's currently in use. So, anything else that we wanted to add? So the questions that we have for other groups, so in relation to those who are working on policies, this question of who would create this land distribution, this type of land sparing process, and also support this process of intensification. Who and how would that be carried out is the question. And then the second question is, what process, to the community members, what process would be needed to help to change behavior around livestock practices and grazing practices? So instead of sending animals up to the higher elevation and then back down again, having these more intensified grazing areas, what's the process that would be needed to shift those behaviors? Anything else that you guys want to add about? Good.
This was a suggestion. There's lots more to do, I suppose, but it was where we went.
That's how we got there. Thanks, guys, for having me.
Okay, and the final group is the community members. Please come forward. Your flip chart is here, and I'm sitting here now because it's easier. I need one chair.
How many papers were there? Could you give us? We were given so many papers. But we still, only these groups are using one paper, one paper. Oh, good afternoon. Yes. I came very late. I didn't say good morning. So that's why I'm being reminded now that they didn't greet us, Chief. Good afternoon. This is Taban, a chief from Bakwena Traditional Council. I'm requested to come and present the issues of our group. Then we were given the task. Then what we did first, we just mentioned the resources that we have in our communities. That is sand and quarry, water, wetlands, indigenous forest, grazing land, herbs, wild animals together with birds, and clean air. Yes, so when we talk about sand and quarry, the challenge that we have that can cause conflict among the people, it's the mining certificates. When we talk about the mining certificates, we mean that there are these certificates that anybody can apply for, then it can be given. But when it comes to the renewal of the certificate for mining, the communities are not consulted. It's just being renewed. But when they first issue it, they come to us. But when they renew the certificate, nobody comes. That is our government. Why is our government doing that? the problem of top-down approach. Our government sits there and decides everything for us. He comes to us with everything that has been done and it's finished. We cannot even add from what he says. If it's a man or it's she, but it's government. So yes, this is one. Then outside people taking the resources from our areas for free. You know, let me make an example. We do have Sibi Bahlagwana Traditional Council. Then everything that is there, it must bring an income to that tribe of Bahlagwana. But you will find that because of these bylaws that are not being done in our areas, you will find someone from Mount Elif, he will come to the area of Mesibi and just take sand without giving Mesibi anything. That thing alone, it can cause conflict. Then the last point, there are no rehabilitation plans in the rural areas where we live. The people will come and take their quarry and take their sand. When they are done, they won't do anything to rehabilitate the land. They will leave it with holes and all those things that are dangerous for our kids. Then when it comes to water, the employment problem. We know that we are here in Matadele and Matadele is not supplying us with water, but only Alfred Nzo district municipality. But when we say employment problem, you see, let me just go straight to the point. We have Ndate Charlie here, that is the leader in that Mafube community. There's a dam there that we call Belfort Dam. That Belfort Dam, as it's being built in that area, it must bring job opportunities for those people. But you will find that the people who are working there by the dam, you don't know where are they coming from. So there's no income that is being brought by that dam to the community of Mafube. And when we talk of water, there's this river water that is not, and the spring water that are not protected. When we talk of not being protected, we talk of anything can happen to our rivers. But let's come to the poor maintenance again. As we have the dam there by Mafube, we do have the dam there by Onkolos Neck. And you will find that we do have these dams and we have taps in our community. But when you open the tap, there's no water at all. Why? Because there is a poor maintenance system from our government side. Then water pollution is one of the problems. And most of the people who are polluting our water with nappies, we are the fathers. Normally we don't use nappies. So you just decide who are using nappies. So you will find the nappies all over the place. Then you will find the plastic. We do pollute water by ourselves. Then because we are so nice and we want our cars to look nice, so we just wash them wherever we are and we pollute that water because we open car wash even wherever we feel like opening it, we can do that. So the dead animals, if my dog died here, I won't bury it. I will just say, pick it up, go and throw it there by the river. You'll just throw it there. But some people are drinking down there, using the same water. So, siltation, wow, what a term. Someone will remind me. Because of siltation, you know, because from up there, when the water comes down, it comes with sand. Then, if you can go and look at the Kweneha River at the moment, the river that we call Keneha, there is no water at the moment, but the sand is all over the place. But when you dip in your spade, you will find the water underneath, because we are not looking carefully of our rivers. Then outside people fetching water without giving us anything. What are we meaning? What are we saying about that? If the municipality has advertised a tender, someone who took the tender, he will price everything there, sand, quarry, water. But when he come to my place, he will just fetch water and go without even paying. So there's nothing that they do for income purposes. Then wetlands. When you drive from Matatiele to Onkolosnek, you will see there are many wetlands. And when you drive to Kokstad, you will see there are many wetlands where the farms are. Then the problem is one, our wetlands are not protected. So any dumping is being done there. So we tend our wetlands to dumping site. Animals are just doing as they please. They even drown there to our wetlands. Then all this cause harm to the birds that are living there. So the birds are affected. When we come to indigenous forest, we have this challenge that can cause fight over harvesting of protea tree. Most of the people who are over harvesting the protea tree, us, we the people with the traditional or the initiation scholars, because we use that tree for fire purposes. So, but now because we are being taught, we are no longer harvesting it anyhow. So anything is illegal harvesting of medicinal herbs. We do have traditional healers in the areas that they will just go to the forest and they will just cut the whole tree and do as they please and they leave it there. That will never grow again. When we come to another challenge is grazing land. A grazing land is one of the resources that we have as community members. But the problem and the challenge we are facing is poor rangeland management. Then that is caused by soil erosion that will have dongas in our areas. So we know that the dongas are the cause of soil erosion. But what is the problem now? The grazing land is full of dongas. That's the problem. Then what we are doing as the community members, we are overgrazing. Then the other thing is water infestation. Then we have a challenge of field fires. There are no fence for camping purposes. That we know that even if it's summer, the animals will eat from this camp. If it's winter, they will go that side. So that when they are eating this side, the grass is growing this side. So there are no fences. That's why it's very difficult to do a grazing rotation. Herbs are disappearing. We normally grow up using the herbs from the field, but because of this grazing that is illegal and it's being done over, it's giving us a problem that the herbs in our areas that we used to use when we grow are now disappearing bit by bit. We do have illegal stock posts. If you can go there by the mountains, you will find even the Lesotho people are having the post in our area because it's not manageable very well what we are doing. Then that results to the stock theft. That is why you will see Matatiele is always fighting because of the stock theft. Then what went well is our sister, I don't know where it's now. Not to you, the one who were giving us the questions. No, it's out, but it's fine. What went well? Because of these resources that we have, they are now giving us money. How, Chief Kwadi? Working for water project. There's a project that Nikki is after. Is looking after it. Then they are the ones that are helping us in that area because they restore our grazing and they restore everything that we are doing. So working for water project is there in the village. So the people are benefiting because I don't know how many are they from the Charlie, how many are they from Messibu who are just being hired to look after that water. Then a charcoal, Mesibi is having now a company in the village using the same resource, that is wattle. They are doing a charcoal. So we no longer buy charcoal from Spar and Boxer, but we buy it from Mesibi's area. Then we do have grazing associations now in our areas through the efforts of CSA and ERS. So we are doing very, very well, because those people are now looking after their grass so that their animals can be fed very well. We are now having in Matadele a green grass-fed meat. So if you want a meat without gout, come to Matadele. You will find no gout in Matadele. So I think that's all we have for today. Thank you.
Just to say again, the problem, the reason for that is that because there's this trend of decreasing available good rangeland because of the wattle on the one hand, and because also of increased building of houses and urbanization, and then a renewed interest in keeping cattle. So on the one hand, there's less land available and not too many animals, not like there's too many animals per hectare, but just too many animals for an area that's degrading. So we were asking the question of how can we make better use of the natural resources that we have. So animals would still be free ranging, and they may you may still have rested areas and unrested areas. So not to say that we do away with any kind of planned grazing, it's just that how can we give that natural area some relief? And so the idea came that fodder, right? So if you have an area where, so it's like cropping, but those crops wouldn't be necessarily maize, they would be something that the animals can have. So I know this is not new or rocket science or anything, and it's happening anyway in some places, but we were thinking to really intensify this and have areas which are growing really high quality fodder crops that is in a winter reserve or even a reserve at other times of year. Then you would, with the same number of animals, you may have your animals in better condition. They have more continuous nutrition throughout the year. They can be sold in good condition. And then you take that pressure off the grazing lands, and then you would have the benefits of increased natural rangelands and fodder there, but also some biodiversity coming back. And even, you know, when plants grow, put their roots down, you start to get more carbon. So that was the things we spoke about. And then, of course, wattle is actually would be part of the whole scenario where to improve and increase the amount of available rangeland. And in removing wattle, you would hope to have water gains, because we know the wattle suck up a lot of water. We may lose some carbon there because they're trees and they hold carbon, but we would, you would hope that the grass would come back. You would have more biodiversity there. And we also talked briefly about then looking at restoration on those cleared areas, so crawling there. Like Pesha has done some of the research on that.
But to operationalise that, I mean, is the suggestion that with the, as opposed to a land sharing, it's more of a sparing approach, and so you intensify within the areas of production.
Yeah.
But you would necessarily then, in terms of the implications for the community, would it mean that some of the land that they have access to now would become protected and they wouldn't have access to it? I mean, this is what I'm trying to get to.
Right. So that would have to be a discussion.
Yeah. So this is what we. So how would the community feel about that? So at the moment you've got an approach which is basically more of a land sharing approach. Yeah, there's multiple kind of benefits or ecosystem benefits coming from the whole area. But if you were to kind of partition it more to say we have, I mean, you could, of course, if you open up the wattle, then it opens up more rangeland as well. But so you basically partition it into various areas that might be a protected area, an area of grazing, an area of intensified fodder production. How would that fit with the community, do you think? Anyone from me?
No, I'm sure that will be much more productive because if we go to that protected environments area, the best way is to go actually to petilate maybe let me say the mountain range where the wattle is much more making trouble. Say that the mountain range is specifically for summer grazing. That is the first petition of our area. Then maybe the other area, maybe we can use it for plowing purposes. Then maybe certain portion is for only for initiation traditionalist initiation schools only. Then the other portion maybe is where we actually try to reserve water much more, so that during the drought we are able sometimes to release water to those wetlands, so that those wetlands, they keep our wild birds alive again. So it's what I'm thinking that we have to, as a community, to brainstorm that. Then as we go along, then for residential purposes and for commercial purposes, I'm sure that we need much more consultation and much more expertise when it comes to actual practical planning of the land. Yes.
Thanks. I'm trying to understand this concept, but I think there is quite a connect between all of this and policy as well, because there are certain policies in place that deal with climate change, with water and food security and things like that. And there's also policies like the Eastern Cape Biodiversity Conservation Plan and the Eastern Cape Parks and Tourism Agency expansion plan and all that. So I think it will fit in with policy as well. And it makes sense for an area, for smaller areas to be extensively grazed and areas to be sort of rested and left for biodiversity. And I think for that to happen as well, one needs to consider these policies, consider which are high biodiversity areas and which are areas where development and other things can take place. And perhaps where areas where there aren't really high biodiversity areas can maybe be looked at as areas potentially for grazing and things like that. So I think we can actually overlay some of these policies and with obviously consultation with communities and looking at the potential of grazing, put all those, overlay all of those, and then come up with a sort of spatial plan of where we can allow grazing, where we should rest or spare some areas.
And we'll kind of get into what we're going to try and do tomorrow, which is the kind of land use, but that doesn't matter. I mean, this is a useful conversation now. But I just wonder if the communities understand the full implications of what's being talked about, because this isn't just about zoning all of your area for different uses for you. This is about you more intensively using, say, 3/4 of what you had potentially, is it not? But saying that some places will be permanently under conservation, so you won't be able to graze them.
I don't know if we suggested that in our discussion.
But that's usually the land sparing thing, is that some land is not used.
Yeah, it depends, I suppose, whether you see livestock as equivalent. On a lot of the area around here, there's not that much wildlife, and so livestock, in a way, replace the wildlife. We didn't go into it, put it that way. There could be a scenario where you have mixed use.
Yeah, okay. So it's
mixed wildlife, and like it is now, mixed wildlife and livestock. And you could then define some area as entirely no livestock grazing, like there are existing nature reserves at the moment. Yeah, I mean, they have their own problems where I think they're actually understocked often with wildlife. And so you could look at bringing wildlife back and even having ecotourism in those areas.
One comment here, yes, and then
From an implementation perspective, it's a bit of a, not a nightmare, but it's quite difficult to implement purely because you're not dealing with homogeneous communities, you're dealing with a group of people all with varying views of how their land should be managed, with what they, resource management, what they want to do with those resources. And also the intensification of your land use means that you're intensifying your management. You need to look for financial capital, human capital, all sorts of different things that these communities may not have. And dealing with that makes it or trying to implement these kind of strategies are very difficult.
Yeah.
I agree with Heidi. Livestock is important to a degree in terms of veld management. So I think to exclude it totally, perhaps in certain areas, but you would like cattle to be included in most areas. But I think what I was coming at is that with regards to some of these other policies, is that we wouldn't like to see land sort of change to cropping and things like that, in areas where there's high biodiversity and stuff like that. So I think that's where the issue would come in. But I don't think there's any harm in allowing for areas to be intensively grazed, and then in seasons where there are droughts or dry periods, for those cattle to go out into other areas that are deemed resting or spared areas. But I think the problem will come in is if you're wanting to sort of crop those areas or make them into sort of fodder for cattle and things like that. I think that then we need to look more intensely at policies, high biodiversity areas and areas where there's potential to expand protected areas and things like that. But I don't think we should exclude cattle totally from rested or shared areas.
But it would require some kind of maybe different approach to management.
Sure.
Sorry, can I use
the idea was that there's a lot of abandoned lands, previously ploughed lands, and that those would be the first to be considered for use of fodder production.
Yeah.
There was another comment back there.
Yeah, Karibon.
Colleague in the last row.
I think he has covered my point. I wanted to say probably if that is to be done, land sparing, it will have to be governed by some law. For example, the community will need to have some kind of a bylaw that will prohibit people from using that piece of land that is intended for that purpose. And also the issue of the carrying capacity of the area, because from what I've heard that the area is overstocked already. They're keeping more animals than they have. They should be, and I don't know if already this group has come into grips with the condition of rangeland in those communities. So that would be some of the factors that need to come into being for that.
Any response from the communities?
Practically at the George Mshesh area, I don't think that we are going to have a problem when it comes to, because we've chosen that we are going to use the protected environment area. We've chosen that is aligned with the policy. So I think that the main challenging is a matter of just how do we manage that properly. Hence, we should agree that when we're plowing field, at a certain time, we don't allow the stock to go there. Then the stock should be around the mountain range. Then, during the winter, when we have harvested maybe the maize meal, the livestock come back to to the plowing fields whereby there are those leftovers of the plants and so on and so on. I'm sure that is an old practice when it comes to study area of regulating areas in a certain manner. That during such a 3 months or 4 months, this area we don't allow cattle or sheep or anything. Then allowing the areas to rest a little bit and recover and so on. That is what you share, that what was practiced is an old age practice of managing the grazing land, the wildlife, at the same time managing the plowing fields and so on. That is not a new thing. The only thing that has happened is that we're not recording our programs by those Asian people. Otherwise, practicing living together with wild animals, stock. Even our chiefs have been named after the wildlife, the pupua, the creatures. So we didn't have that problem because our chiefs at that time, they were having a proper mandate of regulating our communal land.
But they did that without fences, presumably?
No, there was no fence.
But can you still do that without fences? Is the capacity in the community to do that?
No, the problem is that the chiefs don't have any problem of actually controlling the community. The problem did happen in 1994 because the transformation in 1994 was a top-down approach. So that the chiefs, people who were leading us, were not given a proper platform to indicate how do they actually manage social economy. Because before the 1994, chiefs were regulating every able man, that by a certain time, every man should take his hoe and go to the field to cut the island plant. At a certain time, the chiefs were able to say, during the plowing season, every field should be plowed. If you are not able to plow that field, we have maybe to lend it to somebody so that somebody uses it for that period while you don't have capacity to do that. Unfortunately, those powers were taken over. For instance, Chief Jeremiah, sometimes when we did experience that now we can no longer use ox for plowing, as a roving ambassador, he was able to consult Austria. So Austria was able to donate with the tractors. That's why we see that from period of late 80s downwards, there was no poverty in the rural areas. Even the people who were, even if you don't have a cattle, you were entitled to go to your neighbor to get free of charge, because the chiefs were able to manage the socio-economic activities, both land, human and animal, and manpower. So the problem in South Africa, there was that transformation whereby indigenous leaders were not properly consulted.
So I just wanted to put on the radar that there has been quite strong buy-in, and I'm looking to my colleagues and my respected leaders to back me up here, because I think I'm understanding it correctly, around establishing a protected area that Lenswe referred to along the top of the watershed to secure the source of the water, the source of the Umzimvubu. There are other reasons for securing it: ecological infrastructure, potential protection against shale gas exploration, wildlife refuge, biodiversity. There are all sorts of reasons: resilience, ecosystem-based adaptation because of the altitudinal gradient. But there's been, I'd say, little or no resistance to the concept of setting aside a protected area, a rest area in a sense. And it's 6 chieftainships who are all part of the stewardship plan. The declaration process is obviously still got to happen. But the process has been one of co-creation of this area, rather than a sandparks or a conservation authority coming along and saying, you guys must set this aside. It's rather around what is precious in this landscape and how do we look after it best, and what's the best way to look at it. And so there are various mechanisms in the lower areas around residential sites and lands, grazing agreements, which Paul and Zuko have been facilitating, which is a slightly different conservation agreement to potentially a protected environment or a nature reserve. And my observation has been that there's very little resistance to setting aside or to managing better certain areas as long as it's co-created. And there's understanding of the value of that area and the return for a change in management. And that governance is absolutely central. It cannot be top-down and imposed. Otherwise, it's never going to work.
So those protected areas are zero grazing?
No, they're managed grazing. They're limited access. So at certain times of the year, to keep biomass down, because it's high fire area. So one of the management objectives is obviously biodiversity, but it's better ground cover, it's refuge, it's better water source infiltration, controlling wattle invasion, protecting the proteas that the Kwadi spoke about. So there would be limited grazing access, far more limited than in the lower lying areas. So the concept is from the 1800 meter contour up to the watershed boundary with Lesotho. The actual management within that is still being negotiated. It's a long co-creation process, and it's a wonderful process. It's not tedious at all. So I think there's a lot of goodwill where there is co-creation and understanding of benefits. But that's my perspective. I would love that. Leadership can speak.
Anyone got anything else to, maybe from the policy side?
Just a comment on what you're saying, James. I think what would be great is if sites can actually inform the sort of designation and what are those protected areas and ways they can sort of maximise the benefits from these kinds of interventions, especially science-based understanding of where water production benefits are greatest, carbon benefits are greatest.
Part of the planning.
Okay, yeah.
Sandparks, WWF, the water guys, Eastern Cape Parks, we've done biodiversity assessments. They're part of the strategic resource areas. Yeah. It's like a whole mishmash of, it's a mega co-creation. Yeah. Meta.
Yes. Actually, what we did now this afternoon is the basis for ongoing discussions tomorrow. So what we will do, we will look at all the issues that came up. We will try to prioritize, and then we will talk a bit more about some of the emerging issues here. So we will do that in consultation with our team, but it will all be based on what we did this afternoon. So we have a certain format tomorrow, different groups that we will do that would enable us to discuss, and then tomorrow across the stakeholder groups. So we will mix, and we will make sure that each group has a good representation of policy people and academics and NGO and rural communities. So we will be able to discuss in these groups, again, some of the issues and look at some of the conflicts, but also look at the potential. What is possible. So this came also out strongly for me. So there are lots of challenges, but there are also already very good examples of what's happening and how you can address some of these issues. So this will be, both of that will be a focus tomorrow, so we will continue in the morning talking about these issues. If there are things that come up when you go home now, and you reflect and you think, we can do a brief recap session tomorrow morning, and we can see what else might come up, if you continue thinking about these things, where you feel, oh, we missed this or we missed that. We can do a brief recap tomorrow morning on today, and then see what else you want to bring into the discussions before we start with the next group work. So
I just want to bring a small thing that we need to actually not forget about, is the world beef market is driving a lot of what's happening here. The maize price drives the beef price, and world maize price drives the beef price. If we sit and hold our livestock forever and not sell them and not become traders, we end up with a methane problem. There's a serious lobby out there to get rid of livestock because of methane emissions. We haven't discussed this at all. We're sitting on 4.5 million head of livestock in the Eastern Cape here. We're one of the biggest livestock holders in the country. And nobody is talking about global policies that are going to affect our livestock management and ownership into the future. And if you don't digest some of this stuff and become aware of it and make sure that policies are thinking at least about global patterns, you end up losing out. So be aware that there are potential. We can't sit and say, I mean, my experience is traditional livestock owners, Africans, we own livestock and we don't care about anything else. We are going to come short if we continue with a pig-headed policy about livestock ownership and just forget about the other global drivers of these products and these components. Because big companies just now will put pressure on us about reducing methane, increasing CO2 in the soil, or getting more CO2 out of the atmosphere. And we can sit and say, oh, it won't happen. In your lifetimes, it's going to happen. There are big pressures out there, and we haven't talked about it at all. So be aware that we are not sitting. These are global issues that we are going to have to deal with. And I think we need to talk about it tomorrow a little bit.
But it's also interesting because it creates potential tension between. You could almost think that if there is a lot of livestock there, then the carbon sink would be the wattle. So if you're also going to start removing the wattle, then that debate is opens a whole other can of worms around other biophysical parameters that drive reflectance and earth temperature. So we need to be a little bit careful. But I do think that we need to be cognizant of global patterns in livestock ownership and policies. And I mean, I don't know how many of you have read the latest IPCC report. It came out 3 weeks ago. But methane emissions and African livestock is #1. Degradation results in more CO2. More livestock results in more methane. And they've put it out there clearly. It's on the agenda that livestock numbers will have to come down. People need to eat less meat, and there has to be less consumption, less production of cattle. And we can laugh and say, we Africans, we go in livestock. It's not going to work for long. It's going to change. So there will be patterns that we have ignored in things today, and I'd like us to really think about that tomorrow.
One thought just to add to that, are we linked? Is this discussion linked, you know? The issues that are being discussed here, is it linked to what's happening at the global level and where maybe some groups unite and talk about these things? Do people here feel connected to those issues, you know, or to the actors? That's a big question to me. So how can we link and build bridges, or what are the initiatives in other areas? Because everybody deals. It's really good you point this out, Tony, because everybody in the world, whether we're in Germany, in England, in South Africa, Asia, everywhere we deal with these issues. So how are we linked to these global processes? Or if not, how can we link to them, and how can we address this? Thanks for that. Do you have a comment, like a final comment, or?
Oh, mine was on a lighter note. And the lighter note is about, it's based on an observation. The observation is the group, what transpired in the last 15 to 20 minutes here. That is my observation, is based on that. The policy group presented first, and what came out of that presentation, and more of an emphasis, was that the local, so to speak, the civil society groups and the stakeholders at a local level, they need to be consulted on whatever that is happening. But remember, that was coming from a policy group. Now, the policy group presented first, the academics, they had to put some spices on what the policy group have said, and the communities presented last. Instead of being the communities presenting last on what was recommended. And of course, what you get from communities is that that policy group that was presented did not consult them. So they were complaining on what was happening now, later today.
Okay, so this was for today. Tomorrow this will be different. And the order was, there was no hierarchy to the order, and I know you're not that serious now.
No, it was only
yeah.
like that.
I know. No, but there was no hierarchy this afternoon. We wanted all the issues to come up, and you want to make a comment to that?
Yeah? I'm trying to cover.
Let's say a final comment for today.
Yes,
you have a final word.
I'm trying to cover the old man's argument of too much livestock in our areas. The problem with our transformation in the old Transkei, what was actually regulating the stock? If you got 10 cattle, you were taxed. Unfortunately, when it comes to transformation, those laws were not considered. Even you were taxed, even if you got too much donkeys, you have to pay tax for having those too much donkeys on government land. I'm sure those things, we have to visit those archives of the old regime of Matanzia and make some good points of those old, although we thought that Matanzia was bad, not everything was bad. I'm sure you can introduce animal tax. Definitely it will be easy to sell and to keep much more limited stock. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a good concluding comment. So, shall we agree? We meet again tomorrow at 10. You can come a bit earlier, let's say from 9:30.
9:30 will be coffee
tea
again.
And coffee, yeah. So we start getting into the day and digest and reflect on what we discussed today, and please rest also. And we will do some more work and looking at what came out, and then we will take that into tomorrow. So that will be the basis for our work tomorrow. So I would like to thank you all. We both want to say thank you for your great participation today. And tomorrow we'll...
I'll make a start. So housekeeping rules, basically the same as yesterday. Is there anyone here who wasn't here yesterday? Okay, so if you could just make sure that you get a name tag, which you have done, great. Sign in the register, and also there's an informed consent form you need to do, but Linda will come around with that. You need to sign off to say that you're happy. The proceedings are being filmed, okay, and recorded, so you need to sign off with that, okay. So for people who weren't here possibly, toilets just around the corner to the left. Lunch we're going to do slightly later today. We're going to try and get through as much as we can this morning. So it'll probably be from 1 till 2. There'll be a coffee break in the afternoon, and we'll still close by 4, potentially before. Okay? The Umbenyani guys. So yesterday, I must admit, I was absolutely destroyed after I got back from driving there. It's 120 k's round trip, so I got back at 7:15. So we're going to arrange for a taxi to take you out there. So it will leave at 4 o'clock. It will either be a metered taxi, and there'll be 2 of them, or it'll be a combi. Whichever it is, you'll get there, and it'll be paid for. Okay? So yeah, don't worry, you are being catered for. It just won't be me that's driving this time. Sorry about that. Okay. So we were very remiss yesterday. Protocol dictates that there should be a prayer to introduce each of these days, and we kind of rushed headlong into things and forgot about that yesterday. So what we'd like to do is for a volunteer to come up and open the session with a prayer. Anyone from the community particularly, because you guys are very good at doing that. Any volunteers?
Prayer, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you work it out between yourselves. I don't want to comment on people's ages. Anybody who'd like to do that? Just to open us with a prayer.
Yes?
Yeah, absolutely, that's fine. We're happy with that. Let's stand up for that, yeah.
reading of chorus.
Thank you very much for that. That was lovely. Okay, do you want to introduce the session?
Okay. So another good morning from my side, Morueni. We had some reflection last night, so we met and reflected on the day and the rich discussions we had. And we decided to slightly change the format for this morning. So we're not doing this fishbowl discussion that you find on your program, but we will go back into the same groups that we had yesterday and do some ranking of all the issues that came up, because in a way we missed that. We were very busy, you know, in all the issues. So we would like to continue a bit, follow up a bit on that. So we will first go into the same groups. You will find the tables in the same order. The table with the policy is moved into the shade because it's very sunny out there. You will find the flip charts on the table, and the same facilitators as yesterday will guide through that process. So we want to focus in about half an hour on what are the most important issues. How would you rank the issues that came up yesterday? We put post-its there, these little colored post-its, and we want each group, each table, to come up with 2 or 3 key issues, key priorities. Because as you know, we can't do everything, we can't focus on everything. So we want to use today as focused as possible to come up with some concrete ideas and concrete strategies for the next steps. So that is what we want to do first. So if we could go to the tables, and then I will go around and I'm the timekeeper. So after about half an hour, let's see where we are. Then we will come back here to the plenary. We will look at the post-its, at the ideas, and we can again group, you know, we can do some ranking as a group and see what are the main issues coming up. I mean, lots of issues came up yesterday, but we have to have a very clear structure to be able to work forward today.
Yeah.
And then after that first exercise, we will split into groups again, but into different groups. And I will explain that later. So I would suggest we start with that first exercise. So please just go back to the table where you were before, go back into the same groups, the academic group, the policy group, and the community group. And the facilitators at the table know how to go through those steps. Okay?
You've got the post-it notes there, so you might come up with more than just 3, but you need to narrow it down to your priorities as 3. So there might be lots of things which are important that people come up with. But the key thing is to really distill that down to the priorities.
Yes, and if you have more than 3, try to rank and say this is the top priority, this is second, this is third, this is fourth. Yeah, we need to make some decisions, and we need to narrow it down from the vast range of things we discussed yesterday. But we already saw a lot of overlap. We saw a lot of synergies between different groups. So it's not that we're going in very different directions. We could see a lot of people agreeing on a number of things. So we just want to complete that exercise because we didn't really finish it yesterday. Are there any questions on that first issue? Yes.
Yes, madam. On this part of the overlap that you touched on, that was my thinking as well. Now, my question is one group allowed to reflect on the information from the other group?
Of course, yes, of course. That would be even nice, you know. If you take in other ideas that came in, that came from the from our discussion, yes, please bring them in and discuss them in the group and say, what do you think? Can we shift our priorities? So you will have the summaries that you had yesterday on the flip chart. On the flip charts are there, but yes, bring in other aspects. Very good comment. Thank you for that. Any other comments, questions? Okay, then I suggest we try to meet again at 11:15. Let's do it in a structured way. We have a lot of ideas already, but focus on the priorities. And then let's try to meet at 11:15 here and look as a group at all the issues. Okay? So we can get moving. And
it's a lovely day, so it's nice to be outside.
It's nice outside. Okay.